So I was trimming my beard in preparation for being on camera for this episode, and uh, remarkable amount of gray hair. Just truly remarkable.
It's not.
Uh,
I don't like it.
no, it's and it started here. There was like a little tuft,
Uh-huh.
and then it's like spreading.
Yeah.
And I was shaving up here, and I was like, wait a minute, you're not allowed there. Get out of here. Um, it's like because I don't have hair, so I can't see it on
Uh-huh.
the top, So I mean, I bet if I like grew out the sides, I could probably see if there's gray in the sides, but I don't do that. So
Yeah. Well, I have a lot more in the sides. I think that cough that I had in like October made me like twice as gray as I had been before,
is
which
that
is
science?
uh I just like was horribly sick for a month, and then I was like looking in the mirror, and I was like, not only do I look unwell, but I look older. I've got a Dorian Gray situation going on, or the opposite of that. I get the painting.
Quite literally the
I'm the
opposite.
painting in this metaphor.
Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast watching, analyzing, and discussing the collective works of Mike Flanagan. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, the man of my dreams, literally, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
It's going great. It's going great today, Scott. Having a great day. How are you?
I'm so folks, I write the intro part of the intro, and Matt like just ad libs his part, and so I never know what to expect. And I feel like for the past 3 weeks it's just been me like just kind of completely flabbergasted and unsure of what to do next. That was perfect. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I don't read the intro in advance, so I'm just ad libbing.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's great. I love it. This week on the show, we are taking a look at Flanagan's 2016 film "Before I Wake." This is the second film Flanagan will release in the year 2016. Although there's a story about that, Matt, and we'll be getting to that story in just a few minutes. This is one just to remind everyone that it's a fresh watch for both Matt and I. Most of the things we'll be covering on the show are things that I have already seen. This is an exception to that. I had not watched this movie before this week, so pretty excited to talk to you about this movie and see what you thought about it, Matt.
I am also excited to talk to you about this movie. Yes.
All right. Before we do that, though, we did have just a couple of quick things. I wanted to circle back to our episode last week on Hush, because one of the things I said that I had not seen the shush cut or the shush cut as Mike Flanagan and Kate Siegel called it. I had not watched it, and I kind of promised you folks that I would do that. And so last weekend, I actually took some time and watched Hush for the fifth time in through 3 weeks watching the shush cut, and I just wanted to kind of quickly report back to y'all. It's pretty dang good, actually. So to remind everyone what this is, they were kind of cutting together a 4K release on 4K disc for this movie that was released by Scream Factory, and they were going to do a black and white version of the movie. Actually, I didn't know this, but they talk about this in the little intro to the cut. The original plan for the movie was for it to be in black and white, and they ended up kind of giving up on that when distributors told them, "We will not buy your movie
Hmm.
if you do that." So they kind of gave up on that, and they saw an opportunity to redo that in this. And then as they were kind of editing it together, they realized that having a track without any of the soundtrack, the score in it, was having a really cool effect on them. And so the movie's in black and white, the score is removed, and everything else is remixed. And I knew the score was removed part. I didn't know they had remixed the entire rest of the movie. And it's a really cool effect, Matt. It is actually really, really cool to watch. It's kind of like, the opening part where like the mix is intentionally turned up where you like very specifically hear noises and reaction, like to kind of
Sure.
show the transition between hearing sounds and then going into Maddie's head and not hearing sounds.
Hmm.
It's like that, but kind of like the whole movie.
Hmm.
it had a really, really kind of crazy effect on me where I mean, there's multiple points in the movie where they cut to like the Maddie point of view where you don't hear anything except that kind of muffled noise that they play that's supposed to represent her deafness. Um, I noticed them more in this cut, and it's like, I'm not saying they remixed it to where they just added more to them, but maybe it's just like because of the score, I didn't always notice when we were cutting and making that transition every single time, but it really sticks out to you.
Mhm.
I think it's a joy to watch. The other thing I'll say is like I kind of just like shelved away the black and white part of the cut as like, "Oh, that's neat," and didn't think much about it because I was much more interested in the sound changes.
Mhm.
But man, the black and white like really really does affect the movie in a way that I didn't think it would. Just like the kind of the muted contrast of it all really kind of accentuates the isolation and the differences, and like black and white just handles lighting and contrast so much different than color. It's surprisingly affecting, and I really enjoyed the cut. Really did.
That's really cool. Yeah, I didn't watch it, but I can kind of imagine that since it is this movie that's very dark, right? It's nighttime. It much of the movie is at night, and so
Mhm.
I can imagine it playing with that very successfully. That's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I believe the only place to see that right now is on that collector's edition 4K slash Blu-ray that was released by Scream Factory. So if you're at all interested in checking that out, I like definitely recommend that disc. It's great. I mean, the 4K transfer itself is great, and then having the shush cut, I think is a great thing on top of it. So check that out. Worth the money, I think.
Awesome.
The other thing we wanted to talk about, Matt, is something we messed up because we record these a week in advance, and we're still kind of getting our head around what that means. So I wanted to today tell you about our book club this coming Friday, which will be covering Stephen King's From a View at Gate. Unfortunately, I'm in the past, and that by the time you're listening to this, that book club will have already happened. But that means you can go back and listen to the conversation anyway, right? So, for those that don't know, we do a monthly book club here at Doof Media, where our patrons over on Patreon get to select a book for us to read. They send a bunch of nominations. We pick five. Patrons vote on which of the five they want to read. We read the book, and then we get together live on YouTube at the end of the month, and we just chat about the book for an hour or two. It's a lot of fun. It keeps us reading when we get like, kind of like bogged down and all the other stuff we have to do. We still get to read at least 12 books a month, and we get to experience some books that we haven't read before, which is really cool. And then occasionally and for me, I get to experience a book that I have read before in Stephen King's From a View at Gate, but that I love, love, love deeply. I think the conversation has already happened for you guys now, but I'm going to predict, Matt, that we did a really good job talking about that book.
I'm sure we did. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. And it's going to be fun to talk about a Stephen King book in a more kind of freeform way, not not as rigorous as we usually do. Look forward to that. And yeah, we usually do those on the last Friday of the month.
Mhm.
So if you miss this one, catch us next time.
Yeah, yeah. All right. All right, Matt, let's get into the main event. Let's talk about this week's movie, which is Mike Flanagan's Before I Wake. Matt, what is this movie all about?
A couple adopt an orphan child whose dreams and nightmares manifest physically as he sleeps.
This movie was written by Mike Flanagan, and Jeff Howard is directed, of course, by Mike Flanagan. It stars Kate Bosworth, Thomas Jane. These are, by the way, both one and done for these two actors. We won't see them in any more Flanagan pictures, at least so far. Also, it introduces Jacob Tremblay, who will return in Doctor Sleep for just a delightful little part in Doctor Sleep. Those who've seen that movie know exactly what I'm talking about. And apparently, he's going to be back in Flanagan's Life of Chuck, which comes out later this year. It also has Annabeth Gish in it, who we will see in both Hill House and Midnight Mass in the future. So another couple actors added to our stable, Matt. But yeah, it's like we have some that are new and just one and done, and some that are going to stick around for other things.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always a fun treat to see Thomas Jane. We have seen him in Stephen King adaptations. Obviously,
Yeah.
he's great. He does a great job here.
Yeah, I have a thing I want to talk to you about Thomas Jane about. But we'll get that in a sec. What before we get into the movie itself, I wanted to kind of talk about the drama around this movie because this one's interesting, right? It comes out in 2016, as we've said. but it was actually filmed all the way back in 2013. So this movie was filmed before Hush, which we talked about last week. So it was technically Flanagan's third film that he has made, a third feature film. And it was supposed to be released in early 2015, but then it was pushed back, and the distribution company Relativity Media went into bankruptcy at about the same time, and so they kind of just removed it from the slate. Eventually, it finally premiered at Fantasia Fest in 2016, and Netflix acquired the international distribution rights to this movie in 2017. So it was distributed internationally. They actually made discs for it as well. This was still when Netflix was not, I think, quite as hard line on there. We are never making physical media. The only place you'll be able to watch this stuff is our service, like they are now. But still in the US, still had not had a distribution. Finally, Netflix acquired the US rights from Relativity in 2018, and that is when most of the people listening to this probably first heard of this movie or first got to see this movie, was when it hit Netflix in very early 2018. So 5 years from filming to release. Really interesting. Like, this is, I think, the first Jacob Tremblay feature, because the credits has that tag of introducing Jacob Tremblay, but he was in the Academy Award winning film The Room.
Mm.
Uh, which was filmed after this one, but released before this one. So everyone kind of knew who he was by the time they got to see this movie. But I think this is, I bring all this stuff up just because I think it's an interesting, like, this, I think it was definitely Flanagan's like largest film to date at the time of filming. I think even of the ones we've covered so far, probably his biggest. I've looked and seen various reports that this movie cost about $10 million to make, which was double what Oculus was. I think we estimated Hush was about $1 million, so that's 10 times the budget there. So definitely a bigger movie, maybe some bigger stars in it, and it seems like it was a rather frustrating experience for our filmmaker. Just like, you can go back and see, I think the tweets have all been removed, but you can see throughout the kind of cycle of Relativity setting a release date and then delaying and then removing it from the schedule and then putting it back on the schedule and then removing it. Like, he was making his frustration at this process known. And it kind of makes sense. Netflix eventually is the one that kind of swoops in and saves this movie, and so it can get a release here. And Flanagan then proceeded to work for Netflix for a very long time after that. So
Mhm.
you can see, like, probably what endeared him to them, that they kind of saved this movie.
Yeah, I guess silver lining from being, financially jerked around for several years.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that's some good context to help us. Uh, Maybe we can reference this as we go through the movie. Although I don't know, you know, I wonder. So the thing that I was thinking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but this definitely feels like a PG-13 movie, because it is. And I was wondering if like that if that was part of this equation of, this studio wanted, like they maybe had some commercial stipulations on, what the rating had to be, because I don't feel like most of Flanagan's work is PG-13. I feel like I feel like you have to kind of box in some of the stuff that he's good at, or the stuff that is fun, to make it pass through the PG-13 filter, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you could actually look at this movie and almost make the opposite claim and say, hey, this is a terrifying movie that despite the fact that it does stay on the right side of the PG-13 line, it's still absolutely terrifying. And I
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't want my kids to see it, just because, I mean, it scared the shit out of me several times. So that's
Yeah. I mean,
interesting.
I think it is an interesting kind of examination of how we decide, like, how the rating system works. Where, yeah, there's no gore and people don't say many bad words, and so it gets to be PG-13. But also, this movie contains like some of the most like psychological, horrifying things I could imagine happening to a human being ever.
Yeah.
But like, that's fine. We're cool with that. Yeah, come on, teens. come watch this. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Yeah. So this is interesting because I did not get to watch a director's commentary for this because I do not have the disc of this movie. Because there was never a disc of this movie released in the United States. I believe there, like, it was released in Canada, and the Canadian one would work on a region player we have, but I couldn't find it online anywhere. So
Mm,
if anyone has a disc of this movie and wants to send it to me, that'd be great. So I didn't get to watch the director's commentary on this one, so I don't know a lot of the inside information on like how the production went. I know how like the release of the movie went,
mhm.
but like I don't know how much studio meddling there was or was not. It is a movie that to me feels like there was some, but that's just pure speculation, right? I don't know. It does feel like, I think we'll get into the ending and some of the ways this movie wraps up, and it feels like maybe this was some people with their kind of their foot on the brake pedal in some places a little bit, kind of dictating what this can and can't be. But I could be totally wrong with that, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's I had a lot of fun with this movie. It's weird we didn't do a normal thing where we say what we thought about the movie.
We've
Um,
been kind of just all over the place with that in these last few episodes.
yeah, well, that's okay. I did have a lot of fun with this movie. There's almost so I think one reason why I'm kind of having a hard time taking my first bite into this conversation is because like there's like three different places that you could start talking about the movie.
Sure.
And I guess what I kind of wanted to say the PG-13 thing up front because that's to me the thing that almost like jumps out at me and demands that it be addressed in context of this conversation about Mike Flanagan's career is like,
Hmm.
well, this feels different from the other movies. Why? Well, it's definitely going for scares. It's definitely going for psychological horror, but it's not doing a lot of the stuff that the other films that we've talked about were doing, and the things that he will continue to do in his later movies,
Yeah.
and TV shows, and so that gives it that immediately gives it a different feel, different vibe. Um, I actually felt like this is like premise wise and vibe wise, it's almost like a Twilight Zone Ray Bradbury sort of throwback tone in a good way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time like addressing this moral quandary dimension that isn't I mean there's a undertone of horror, but it's not in your face until later in the movie. And specifically what I mean is, the first half of the movie, I was thinking like, "Oh, okay, the mom is the monster." But I meant that not his mom, the adoptive
The
mom.
foster mom.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
foster mom is the
Hmm.
monster. Turns out the mom is the monster. I was right, but I was wrong.
Hmm.
You follow me. Um, because the foster mom is doing all sorts of shady things. She's totally compromised. She's behaving very unethically, and it's all understandable. You-
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
um, so you feel horribly torn between being like, I get it, and being like, that's monstrous at the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I mean, I honestly I approached this movie like I had heard of the release issues with this movie, and I had perhaps unfairly like drawn a conclusion from the fact that the studio seemed so hesitant to release this movie. And the conclusion I drew was that this movie wasn't very good, and that's why they didn't want to release it, is because they didn't think it was very good, and they didn't think it was going to do very good in the theaters. I just was kind of shocked to find that that's not correct at all. Like,
mm,
I think this is a really good movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think there is a point that I think we're going to talk about where the movie kind of lost me the first time I watched it. I think I've grown to appreciate it on second viewing since then. But it's about the point where Thomas Jane's character dies. I was like totally on board for the movie. I was loving every bit of it. I was hooked. I was devastated and torn in all the ways you just mentioned. And then from that point on, from that point to the end of the movie, it kind of lost me a little bit. Again, I've gone back on subsequent viewings, and I think I appreciate it a bit more. But I think the kind of exposition finale of kind of the moment where she sits Cody down and explains what happened, essentially the
mm,
plot for us. Um, I think that didn't work as well on me.
mm,
But yeah, no, this movie is horrifying.
yeah.
Like, I mean, so to put some context in this for listeners that might be new to you and me, we are both parents. We both have kids. Your kids are older than mine. I have a almost 4 year old and a almost 18-month old. And yours are, gosh, how old are your kids now? They're like
They're
teenagers,
they're
basically.
between 8 and 12.
Yeah. But essentially, like, we both have young enough kids to where we remember the existential nightmare of what could possibly happen to my child. That begins when your wife is pregnant
Yeah.
and never goes away.
Right. Yeah. You say remember, like experience
Yeah, yeah.
the daily anxiety.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. You get through the first trimester and you're like, "Okay, the odds of a miscarriage have gone down greatly now, so I won't be worried or anxious about my kid's health anymore."
yeah.
Wrong,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
wrong.
No. So like that's definitely worth talking about. Yeah. So the worst part of the movie, in terms of confronting you, is it makes you really put yourself in that position of the horror of what that, it forces you to imagine what that would feel like,
Yeah,
and it forces you to confront all of the aftermath of that, and it's super upsetting.
yeah. I have a very hard time judging Jessie, the mother in this movie, too harshly for the things that she does, because I am like, yeah, I would do that too, probably. Like,
Mm,
I like so. Fortunately, I have not lost a child in this way. I think I can't imagine a thing worse that could happen to a person is losing a child in this way. Like, I think we were talking about this earlier this week, but like, it's one thing if like your kid gets sick and passes away. That's awful, right? Like, that's the worst possible thing I could imagine.
mhm,
Awful, awful, awful. But like, to have like a freak accident like this, where you're going to be telling yourself for the rest of your life, if only I had done
mm,
X or Y, like, I just I don't know how you exist as a human being if that happens to you. Like, I
mhm.
just don't know how you, like, go on
Yeah,
and continue to just live life and, like, go to work and just, like, like, I just don't know how you would ever do that. So,
yeah,
and I think you're right. This movie puts you in that point of view, like,
yeah.
perfectly.
I think that's, I think some of the best stories are often written from the perspective of like, well, let's explore that, right? And I feel
Yeah,
like that's what
yeah.
this is, where you even have the two characters, Thomas Jane and and his wife, whose name I'm blanking on,
Her
um,
name is Jessie.
Jesse. Okay, and she's clearly not moving on, and this is one case where it's like, yeah, of course she's not. Like, you don't expect her to, but he kind of is, and it's not. I don't know if I should say moving on. I don't even like that phrasing. That's just a phrasing that is kind of commonly used. It's more like he's dealing with it by just trying to go on with his life and not dwell on it, and to some degree that's working for him.
Sort
But
of.
it's not, yeah, sort of, right? It's not like he's free from the grief. He's just, you've got to have a strategy, and his
Yeah.
strategy is, I'm gonna just not engage with this. I'm just gonna keep moving. And then her approach is like, she's trying to go to therapy. um there's these interesting scenes where she's in the group therapy sessions, and there's some really interesting dynamics that come out of these group therapy sessions. Like, there's a lot of
Yes.
really interesting back and forth. There's a lot of really interesting things the therapist says. um there's like an undertone of like adversarial, but also he has a point. There's kind of a push and pull. There's a push and pull in a lot of the dynamics, which makes the character scene, like, when I say character scenes, practically any scene where there's dialogue, there's always that push and pull and that tension of like, well, easy for you to say, and yet what you're saying is probably good advice, but you're not in this position,
Yeah.
and you the listener the viewer feel yourself pulled back and forth by that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I like most about this movie is how Flanagan kind of frames the Mark and Jesse marriage
Mhm,
relationship, because you're absolutely right. Like, they both, this horrible thing has happened to people. And by the way, I haven't seen the exact statistic, but like, when when a couple loses a child like this, like, it ends in divorce, like, a huge amount of time, like,
mhm,
just a absurdly high amount of the time, just because, like, even if you don't consciously blame the person, that sits with you, and I think we see that in this movie, right? She says to him at one point in the movie, "I won't let you take him away from me again."
Mhm.
And like I find that fascinating because like the movie never clarifies what we mean there, right? Like we
Yeah.
don't actually know. He just gets really upset and calls that unfair. And the implication in my mind was that perhaps when this child drowns in the bathtub, he was the one that was supposed to be taking or looking out or
Mhm.
didn't hear or what have you. Like it was him and he failed to do that, and she blames him for it on some level. Um,
Yeah.
I don't even know, but like that's what I mean about so much of the dynamic between these two characters is subtextual. I think like we so rarely come out and say, you know, especially with him, like what he actually is doing to work through this grief. Because she talks about how he used to come to group, but he doesn't anymore. And
Mhm.
she wishes he did. But we see him, there's several shots of him drinking, like he's got a can of beer in his hand. But I don't know if the movie like rests on that enough and it occurs enough for us to say, oh, he's dealing with this through alcohol. I mean, possibly, but we don't like see it. Um, there's all these moments and stuff like when Cody first asks where Sean is and Jesse appears and says he's in heaven, like Mark gives her a look. Like
Mhm.
it's this Thomas Jane does this really interesting thing where he gives her a look when she says that, which isn't necessarily like that's bullshit, but it's not that either.
Mhm.
It's like I don't know. It's really fascinating. Like
Yeah.
I don't even I don't even know if you clocked
I
that,
yeah,
but
I think
like
so. I think we're just seeing all these vectors of tension between these two characters where
yeah, yeah,
they they each have their own way that they're trying to deal with this, and like the mere fact that the other person is there and dealing with it in a different way is like annoying because it's
yeah,
like you're you're making this harder for me by existing. Like you can see why people get divorced. Like it's like, okay, now your sole function in my life appears to be to remind me of this horrible tragedy and maybe make me feel like I'm falling short in some way. And like this is all we have in common now, right? Like it's just very
hmm
easy to see how that plays out. And um I think there's even a suggestion, and I think this is very much subtextual. I don't know that I could even point out to like a line of dialogue that supports this, but it's more just the performances, the impression that maybe the reason they're adopting a kid is to save their marriage. I
yeah,
think the reason I say that mainly is simply the first scene where we meet them and they're talking to the counselor, the placement agency counselor, and Thomas Jane is like very he looks very skeptical. Like it's almost like his performance is like I don't necessarily want to be here. I don't necessarily think this is a good idea.
hmm
Um I don't think he doesn't say this, but it's almost like he doesn't seem happy. He doesn't seem excited about the prospect of having a replacement son. Like this isn't this seems like her thing, which is ironic and I think interesting because he goes on to have a much more sort of human one-on-one relationship with the kid
yes,
while she completely spirals and gets obsessed with the idea that this kid is little more than a magical device that can give her access to her own child.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, some of the most brutal scenes for me are the scenes like I think you can tell a movie's working on you when you like know bad shit's about to happen and you're like desperate for it to not happen. And the sequence where, Thomas Jane spends the day with this kid, like just that moment when they're building the race car bed and he's like, screw Phillips,
mhm,
and like the kid is like and then when he's putting him to bed, he said, "This is the best day so far." You're
mhm.
just like, fuck, man, like I really want all these people to just get to live a happy life together. Like I
Yeah,
really want that. And you know it's not going to happen. You know it's not in the cards. And that breaks your heart. And I think like that's when I knew, oh yeah, like I'm on board for what's happening here. I'm on board for everything this is doing.
yeah,
Because that really really broke my heart.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
agree. That's the thing. The movie works on in so many different ways, and it does so many different things successfully.
yeah,
It actually changes what you think it's doing several times during what is actually a very reasonable runtime.
yeah,
Which I think maybe is part of the thing about the ending that maybe feels, I don't know what the right word is. I was gonna say off, but it's like I think it's just a choice. Like it's just there's a point, and it's almost exactly an hour into the movie, and it's when Thomas Jane dies or is eaten, whatever wherever he goes.
He's
Uh,
dead. He's
he's
dead.
dead. No, he's fine. Um, and that's the movie basically saying, all right, we're doing a different thing now. We're
Yeah.
changing this into a different kind of movie. It's very stark. It's like there are visual cues that almost tell you, hey, we're changing it now. Because the thing I noticed is prior to that, when you see the monster, the canker man, it's dark. You don't get a good look at it. It's scary as hell. And then and then it's like well lit in that scene, and then that was actually the moment when I kind of it like clicked for me. I was like, oh, it's the mom, and by that I mean it's his mom. His mom got sick and died, and that's what the monster is. And I
Mm,
got it in that, like in that exact scene, the scene where it's eating Thomas Jane, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like that works actually. Like that all came together for me.
yeah.
And then and then the movie from that point on, it's a different different tone somewhat. It's yeah, it's just a narrative shift past that
Yeah,
point.
we shift into this thing that I actually like. I don't know what to call this, but like I feel like a lot of horror movies do
Mm,
this part where like the person is like desperately pouring through medical records in the past. Like it happened in The Ring. Like
yeah.
this moment where like we've got to figure out the monster, so we're pouring through the medical records of the past to try to figure out the origin of the monster.
Mhm.
And I felt like we shifted into that, and that just felt different. And yeah, there was a part of me that like wanted the old that what the story was doing before that moment back. And it's not like I don't ultimately like the way it ends, because I do, but yeah, like there is, you're absolutely right, there is a definite shift there.
Yeah, because you could imagine, this would be a totally different movie, and this is not this is not a. It would have been better if, but like you could imagine a very dark and twisted and messed up version of this movie where like she just keeps the kid locked up in the house so that she can use him as a projection machine for her dead son or
Oh,
something.
yeah. Yeah.
Like that would be uh that. And I'm not saying I wanted it to be that, but there was a part of me in the middle part of the movie when I thought, like, is that where we're going? Like, is she gonna be the one who kills Thomas Jane? You know, like,
Yeah.
because she seems very much the villain in the middle part of the movie. In
Yeah.
a again, like a relatable villain, but drugging the child so that the child will sleep so that she can see her dead son is very messed up.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting, wonderful like creation. First of all, I think Kate Bosworth is playing this character like almost perfectly, to where she's kind of dead inside, and she's got to play like I think this is one of those sneakily hard things where like you want to perform an emote to where you're like interesting to watch
Yeah.
and convey emotion, but you're also like the direction has to be like you are broken. You are like a fundamentally broken person, and you are not doing well at all. And one of the I don't know why I picked up on this part in particular, but when they, I think it's like the first night they've realized kind of what's going on here, and they're like, oh yeah, he's, when he dreams Sean comes, and they've shown him the video, and I think it's the day after they've done the Christmas stuff with Sean. And she's just kind of sitting there waiting, and it's like late at night, and she's waiting for the kid to go to sleep. I don't even think he falls asleep on this night, but that's when, oh no, he does. This is actually the Christmas night, because like Thomas Jane is like, we got to go to bed. Like he needs sleep, and you need sleep too. And she says I'm going to make another pot of coffee, and he's like, no, 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 don't do that. And then she looks at him and she says, I'm going to make another pot. And just like the way she says that is the moment that I was like, oh, she's like dead. She's
Mhm.
like dead on the inside. Like just the way she's like, it's not like, it's not this eager, I'm going to make another pot because like I'm excited to see my son again. It's like, yes, she is like in desperate need to see her son again, but it's not this like she's just dead, and like this is the only way she can see herself to any semblance of life.
Mhm.
And I thought that was just a perfect line read. I loved it so much. It's really great. I suggest you all go back and watch that particular scene.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, like, she's it's so brutal, and I find the drugging of the kid really interesting because yeah, she drugs she drugs a child, but like she also went to a doctor and said he has insomnia, he's not sleeping, and the doctor writes her a prescription. Like she knows what she's doing, right? Like
Mhm.
the motivation for that is clearly suspect, but like also I think that the deliciously like evil part of this is she also can have this narrative of self-justification because yeah, like kids need sleep and he does actually need sleep. Like that argument she makes to Thomas Jane's character is like, look, kids need to sleep. He needs to sleep. We have to let him sleep. And if in doing that he can help us heal, well, that's great, right? And that's how she's justifying it to herself. And it's still insidious and awful. I don't want to take any of that away, but like it's got this built-in trap in it.
Yeah.
Where you can totally justify it because yes, children need sleep and he needs sleep for
Yeah.
sure. He should not continue to take stimulants to keep himself awake, but also you're using him.
Yeah, there's also, I think, the dawning awareness that they have that, like, this isn't a magically, resuscitated Sean. This is just a projection. This is just a
Yeah.
dream project. And, the first time they see the kid, they have no idea what's happening. They're just it's totally shocking to them. It
Hmm.
doesn't fit into their schema of anything at all. It makes no sense. I don't even think at that point they have like the hypothesis of like, oh, it's his dream projections. And so that's I think it affects both of them tremendously. But then relatively quickly after that, they really do know like, oh, it's just his dreams. And
Yeah.
you're basically seeing a 3D movie of the kid. You're not really like he's not alive again. Um,
Yeah.
but she's doing these things anyway, and I think again, despite the fact that a big part of you is like, this is terrible, this is like a horribly unhealthy coping strategy, part of you still empathizes with the need to do that, if
Yeah,
you
I
have
mean,
the
I have to
ability.
be 100% honest with myself and say, yeah, I would do it too. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
this is why I haven't read Pet Cemetery again since I had children
Mhm.
because I would just be reading that book, be like, yep, yep, put him up there, yep, bring him back.
Yeah,
I don't care about the risks. This is my kid. I need to see my kid again.
yeah.
Um,
He's just a little
it's
evil.
it's just yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here, right? Like of course I would, and I would hope that I would draw the line at drugging my child, and I would hope I would be more of a Thomas Jane in this situation than I am a Kate Bosworth. But like, yeah, like it's really hard to be too like we. It's very easy to sit here in these chairs and be like, yeah, that was fucked up, Kate.
Right.
Where it's like, yeah, but I would do it
Yeah.
because I want to see my kid again,
That's
even one more time.
Yeah, that's definitely. I think this is a great thing this movie is doing, and I think a thing that Flanagan's scripts tend to do, and also actually, frankly, strikes me as a fairly Stephen King thing to do, is like it
Mm,
puts the character and thus empathetically you in a position where you find yourself empathizing with and pseudo endorsing some pretty terrible choices, because you're like, well, if I were in that situation, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but like, I was just also thinking like one great thing about horror movies like this is that you find yourself having thoughts like, I hope that little kid kills that other little kid because he's really rude and mean, and I hope he dreams and summons the monster and the monster eats him, and then it does, and you're like, good,
Wait, wait,
huh? What?
maybe not good. Yeah, I love that little like side story of like that not love triangle, but like between him, the bully, and the little girl
Uh-huh.
at school that likes him. Like I loved that whole little bit. And again, that's another moment that makes you feel like so miserable because you're like,
Mhm.
I just want him to like have this fun friend at school and live a normal life. And she's clearly like wants to be his friend. And man. And then
Yeah.
she has to witness the canker man eat somebody, and she's probably gonna be fucked up for life too. This is
Uh-huh.
great.
Yeah. I I love the sort of in the background narrative of the cops interviewing people where they're like, clearly they got the story from the little girl claiming that she saw a monster come in and eat the kid
Mhm.
and insisting on it, and then being like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Let's ask the other kid who was there. And then he's just like, I didn't see anything. And then they're just like, okay, the kid, where'd the kid go? Where's the kid? He's just gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and then everything happens with Thomas Jane, and like he becomes the suspect, right? Like
mhm,
this is actually a thing I wanted to talk to you about a little bit here. So that sequence. So essentially, Thomas Jane gets eaten. Uh, Kate Bosworth gets smacked in the face and knocked out unconscious. And when she wakes up, Cody is awake and calling the police. The police come and like she's got a big fat bruise on her face.
mhm.
So the fair assumption is, hey, your husband did that to you and now is missing, right? And they know that she has given the child um medication, Ambien. Well, not Ambien. I think it's, what is it called? I wrote it down. Um, oh my god, where did my notes go?
Zolpidem.
Zolpidem. Yeah, which by the way is just Ambien. It's just like the non-brand name
Mm,
Ambien.
okay,
In the movie, they called it pediatric Ambien, but it's not.
okay,
It's just brand. It's just brand name Ambien.
gotcha.
Don't give your child Ambien. By the way, just don't. Ambien is meant for 18-year-olds and older. You can like if a kid has like super serious insomnia, you can like try Ambien and see what happens, which is like I think what is happening here, right? Like she tells the doctor what's going on. The doctor prescribes him Zolpidem, and then like I felt a little weird how social service people were like immediately like, "What the fuck, Jesse? What did you do?" And like all they know is she got beat by her husband. The child has insomnia and therefore was given a sleeping pill. And then like the first thing they do 2 nights later when they've taken custody of the child is is give him sleeping medication to force him to sleep. I just didn't understand why they were like the social worker is like, I never want to see you again. And
Mhm,
it's like, what sh- what'd she do?
yeah. I don't know, I think it's funny. I mean, I take your point entirely. I just wasn't thinking about that at the time. I feel like also the social workers like this, like on some level knows that this kid is cursed
Yeah. Yeah.
and is like mad to kind of hide her anxiety about this situation where she's like,
Yeah, that's fair.
I finally thought I had a placement for this kid, and yet again we have like a weird disturbing disappearance. And yeah, I mean the whole sequence where everyone in the hospital is, cocooned is actually pretty great, like visually. Um,
Yeah, but and once again, setup and payoff, right? Because why
mhm,
are they cocooned? Because of the chrysalis
yeah,
until they're keeps them safe until they're grown up.
yeah, yeah.
Um, by the way, like speaking of setup and payoff, I do want to talk to you briefly about the scenes with the therapist because I think
Mhm,
this is honestly, if we're looking at trends in in the Flanagan movies so far, with the exception of Hush, every single one of these movies has had a person experiencing something supernatural, talking to a therapist about it, and the therapist very reasonably being like, "No, it's not that. It's just your brain." And then because we're in a horror movie, they're wrong.
uh-huh,
But they're still giving like very good advice. And the thing about this one and this movie is the therapist essentially predicts the entire film,
mhm,
right? So here's the quote he tells her: "Dreams are just conversations we're having with ourselves. Every character in your dream is actually just you. And when we're trying to bury uncomfortable emotions or ideas, or we feel threatened, sometimes the only outlet they have is our subconscious. It's normal for us to feel haunted by our past, by our losses, by the children we've lost. But just so you know, Sean is not haunting your home. The question is, what are you trying to say to yourself? What unresolved emotions are struggling to get out?" Now, he's talking to Jesse about her dreams, but essentially, this is exactly what's happening in Cody, right? Like
mhm,
he's got this unresolved trauma. He doesn't even fully remember or understand it, but it's there in his subconscious, desperately trying to worm its way out. And also, he has magic dream powers that is making all this stuff manifest. But like, yes, Sean is not haunting your home. Fact. Yes.
Yeah.
The characters in your dreams are just you. Fact. Yes. The Canker Man, as we see, just transforms into him at the end. It's all just him. This is the like. I think this is a really fascinating trend in these Flanagan movies, and I wanted to at least talk to you about it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. The rich understanding of psychology and trauma, and then telling that via genre, um, is right up our alley in all kinds of ways, actually.
For sure.
Uh, but yeah, that I love all that stuff. The idea of, I mean, I think it's hard to tell when you're aware of what, but like fairly early on, you're like, okay, that like he's obviously manifesting the monster, but you're just like, what is the nature of that? Is
Hmm.
it, and I think there is actually something of a misdirect, but it's subtle. So maybe it's not so much a misdirect as just one possible interpretation you could have at different points in the movie. But I was thinking like, okay, so the creature is supernaturally his mom. It's actually his mom actually haunting him, kind of inhabiting him, and his mom has like infested him, right?
Yeah.
It's the ghost of his mom,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, it's literally, it's all him. He is haunted by his mom, quote unquote, but it's he's doing it to himself,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of how everyone's haunted by their, just like she's haunted by her son, right?
Hmm.
It's your own mind doing that to you.
Yeah, and it's this really interesting thing where like we never see the Canker Man go after him, right?
Mhm,
Like the Canker Man is always defending him either
mhm,
physically or emotionally. We just don't realize it at the time. And the only time we see him attacked by nightmare things are like, I think it's just the manifestation of the kid that the bully is the
yeah,
one that like grabs him and pulls him under the bed. And that's just his guilt manifesting towards, I feel responsible for killing this kid, so I'm going to manifest like a monster version of him that's going to try to attack me. But
mhm,
like the Canker Man, like it comes off as ominous when he goes up to his ear and whispers like, "I will always be with you," because he does it in gravelly horror monster movie
yeah,
speak. But yeah, he's just protecting him, and so
yeah.
like that's his subconscious like being scared of this thing he doesn't understand, but also like subconsciously kind of recognizing the paternal instinct of it at the same time.
I also thought there was, I don't know if it's consistent enough to be a pattern, but the the day that it eats Thomas Jane, is that the evening of the day where they had a great day together, or
Um,
is that a subsequent day?
I believe so. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so my interpretation of that is like his night, like he's finally creating like an actual loving relationship with the parent figure, and this part of himself, which is basically like his nightmare worst case scenario, is like, well, what if this person who I'm starting to love as a father also gets taken from me? And so that's what happens, because it's his nightmare, it's his fear, basically.
Yeah.
And I
I mean,
felt like,
that's what happens with the one woman that gets the flu, right? Is
right,
essentially this, he subconsciously sees the same thing happening again, and he lashes out by making that thing true. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I think you're spot on there. I mean,
yeah,
because it's true that like the Canker Man knocks out Jesse,
yeah,
doesn't eat her,
right,
right? Like the kid's unconscious because he's been ambiented up, but so
yeah,
but it doesn't eat her. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because he doesn't love her. He kind of, I think he rightly, I mean, first of all, I don't know if we've said it since the very start of the episode, but just the fact that like this little kid actor really carries this movie quite successfully. I mean, a lot relies on him. I think he portrays this character who's a very lovable character, where it's this kid who's, as described, he's very self sufficient. He's very, you know uh, wise beyond his years, and he's trying to keep it together. He's trying to protect the people around him, and just has no real ability to do that. This is just out of his power, but he's doing his best regardless.
Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, I think you also see that like he knows accurately that at that point in the story she is using him,
Yeah.
and it's only after she kind of realizes what's going on with him and the nature of the situation, that she kind of realizes what a piece of shit she's been,
Yeah.
and tries to make amends for it. And I think by the end of the movie, there's been a reversal in their relationship. But at that point, yeah, it just slaps her because it doesn't care about her.
Mhm. There is a really wonderful scene before that that I wanted to touch on it, and this is one of those moments that I think we get to see Flanagan's directing and camera work kind of shine through because it is that same night. It is, I think, she's already drugged the kid and he's asleep, and Thomas Jane. I think this is the one where Thomas Jane is maybe it's after the one where Thomas Jane is talking to her about how this is messed up. But like he's talking to her and he says, "Are you okay?" She says, "I don't think I am." And they're talking on opposite sides of the frame. Um, and then he walks past her and then turns around and is like now like on the same side of the frame, like talking. They're facing the same direction. He's talking to her, but he's not looking at her. But he's basically just saying, he says something to the effect of um, like there's a kid up there who needs you're a great mom. There's a kid up there who needs a great mom, and you need a kid. It's the perfect match. This is all we need. We don't need anything else. Believe me, we don't need anything else. And he says to her, and then he makes that transition. He's on her side of the frame, and he says to her, "Come to bed, please come to bed." And to her credit, she does. She says, okay. She
Mm,
hugs him and says, okay, she'll come to bed. And it's this real moment where you're like, oh, there's hope here. And then everything goes to shit after that. But I really like the camera move because we've seen them throughout the movie as essentially adversarial, both plot line wise and I think how the camera frames them in scenes that they're like they're not seeing eye to eye. They're as you said, they're kind of frustrated with each other at the way they're each handling this thing differently. But then Flanagan literally moves him over to be on the same side as her.
mm,
And show and this moment of perhaps she would have gone like if everything that didn't happen, she would have gone to bed with him and she would have started to let this idea go. That would have been a successful thing and we would have moved on from it. Of course, that's not in the cards, but like I thought it was a really, really powerful moment. And that's again why I can't judge her too harshly. Like there's a part of me that wants to go like, yeah, you monster, how could you drug a child just so you could see home movies of your other kid? But
mm,
like
yeah,
I sympathize with her and we also see her reach a moment of clarity with this, I think.
yeah. I think so. I mean, it's only a few days, and then she, I think, comes to her senses,
Mhm.
basically. And but then it's too late. Like you just said, it's like you desperately want the movie to end right there. Like, okay,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
got it. She's not, they're not gonna treat him badly. He's gonna resolve the issue with his nightmares, and everything's gonna be fine. Um, but and like at that point, you like Thomas Jane a lot more than you like her. So I think
Mhm.
that's one thing that kind of sucks about losing him, and then being like, oh, now we're stuck with her, and so she has some ground to make up, which I think she does, because she has to confront this evil magic to to save him at
Yeah.
great risk to herself.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
The entire third act is her kind of redeeming herself.
yeah. Mhm.
And it works. I did want to talk about Thomas Jane a little bit, who's I think really good in this movie. I do find his hair just incredibly distracting, though. I don't know what it is, but I just like in my head, Thomas Jane has short trimmed hair and not this long coiffed he's wearing, and it just really distracted me a whole lot.
So, in the first scene when he's in the when they're in the discussion with the social worker, he's the hair is there and it's kind of draggled, and he's like really serious, almost like angry, like I said a minute ago,
Mhm.
and I was just like, oh, he looks really evil. Like is he like he looks creepy? Is he going to be the villain? And then we don't go that way, obviously, but it was like a very negative first impression of his character. I'll be honest, I'm generally quite good at recognizing actors, but like the very first time it showed his face, I was like, I did not recognize him as
Huh.
Thomas Jane, and it was
Interesting.
because of the hair, actually. And then once
Yeah.
you see once he speaks, especially, you're like, oh, duh, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
My Thomas Jane story is I was at Fantastic Fest when the film, I think we watched this 1922,
yeah,
the Stephen King film
yeah,
premiered.
we did a
And
episode,
and he
yeah,
was he was there at the premiere. It's also the same year I think Gerald's Game premiered, and I got to watch that at Fantastic Fest too. Which, by the way, like we'll talk about that movie in a few months, but man, that played at that crowd. But
Mhm.
anyway, Thomas Jane walks into the Q&A after the movie, and he's not wearing any shoes, and it's just because he like hates shoes. And so like every moment in the movie where I saw he was not wearing shoes in a scene, I was like, I wonder if this was just just Tom saying, I'm gonna take my shoes off here because I
Yeah.
don't want to wear
Yeah,
shoes.
I don't think the character needs to be wearing shoes in this scene. That's great.
There's definitely a couple throughout the thing where you see he's not wearing any shoes, and not even just like he's barefoot, not like it's pretty great.
I'm gonna make that my thing now. I don't wear shoes anymore from this moment forward.
Please, please don't make that your thing.
I'll consider making it a thing.
I do like. I think we jumped off Jacob Tremblay a little bit prematurely, but like I agree with you. I think he's a remarkable little like I feel like every generation there's like a child actor that comes along that's just like too good,
Uh-huh.
too young. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking Macaulay Culkin, Haley Joel Osment, Abigail Breslin. Like there's just these kid actors that are just like way better than their age indicates they should be, and they have like are asked to shoulder just incredible emotional burdens in these kind of movies, and they just they just do it.
Mhm.
We talked about the actress in Oculus who I'm blanking on her name. She was really fantastic, but I think this is just like this performance, like the entire movie hinges on this kid,
Mhm.
and he nails the cute bits, he nails the sad bits, he nails the quiet bits. Like I think he's just fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's one of the main characters, right? He's not just like, "Oh, yeah, and then there was the kid." It's like you're into his struggle and what's going on with
Hmm.
him just as much as anybody else, because
Yeah.
he's these two we spend most of the time talking about the parents. I think partially because we are parents, and thus there's natural empathy there, but also there's a lot of natural empathy for this kid who
Oh
lost.
my god.
He's an orphan. He's been bounced around between foster homes. He, you know, uh, I don't know. You can just feel for him
Yeah, I
easily.
mean, he's terrified of going to sleep, and not
Yeah.
not because his dreams scare him, but because he's scared of what he will do to other people.
Mm,
Like he knows he doesn't understand what the canker man is, but he does understand that when he goes to sleep, the canker man comes and it kills people, and like just all the little bits and things. Like he's got his stimulant um box, he's got like the rubber band on his arm that he uses to like pull and flick him, like to keep him
yeah.
awake. And it's like this kid's like what, 8 years old, and like having to do all these things to just keep himself awake because he's desperate to not hurt anyone.
Mhm.
Like how awful
Yeah.
of existence is that? Like this poor child. Like and that's on top of everything else he's gone through of like being shuffled around. Like just losing your mother and then being shuffled around foster families alone is enough to completely destroy you as a kid, but also having this great burden placed on you.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, knowing that it is actually his fault essentially,
yeah,
not that he chose to have this curse. Um, yeah. Yeah, that it's there's also there's like the sort of the shining-esque, like, you're cursed with this power, that you didn't ask for, and that uh, uh you accidentally hurts people, and that's I don't know,
mhm,
for some reason I always that's uh there's just a trope that I love, actually. It's really like that.
yeah.
It's,
Um, did she buy him coffee?
I think
So
so.
there's that scene where she picks him up from work or from school, and she's got what looks like two coffee cups.
I mean, I guess that's the default. It's funny you say that, because as soon as you say that, I'm like, yeah, that is the obvious implication. The funny thing is that I get my kids stuff from Starbucks all the time, but it's not coffee. It's just the fact that Starbucks is now a sugar store that sells sugar,
Yeah,
and not coffee anymore, and they make most of their money selling sugar drinks, which my kids ask for, and I
yeah,
get it for them as a treat. So just from my life experience, I was like, oh, it's probably just one of those horribly unhealthy sugar drinks. But yes, it does look like it's just coffee.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I get my son Logan coffee all the time, which is just chocolate milk that I get when
yeah,
I go to to a coffee. house. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, it could just be that, but yeah, it's like I was like, huh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the one of the poignant aspects of all this, I think that you're thinking about as you watch the movie is like he's he's trying to just never sleep. Like
Hmm.
this is his goal. And what's poignant about that is like, okay, kid, that's not possible. Like you're not going to make yourself never sleep
Yeah.
by drinking a bunch of soda. You're going to fall asleep. But you know, he's like, no, I'm gonna try it. I'm just gotta drink more soda. And it's a very like believable childish thought to think that you're going to successfully not sleep. But being the adult, you're like, oh, like poor kid. You know, I don't know. It's really easy to empathize with the kid. And again, all this is subtext communicated through the performance and the script. So it's great.
Yeah, I mean, and I especially love, that one scene where I think it's after he's seen the Canker Man for the first time in his new home. He's drawing him and then scribbling out the drawings
Mm-hmm.
because he's just like, sometimes this works, and he doesn't really understand why. Um, but like, he just try like, it's so sad, man. It's
Yeah.
like, ugh, what a horrible existence. And like, that's, I mean, I guess we have a good ending, quote unquote, right? Like I guess we can shift to talk about the ending a little bit here, because so she saves him. She explains what's going on, and by the way, another payoff to a setup earlier in the movie where she doesn't quite understand why he's so scared of sleeping yet, and tells him the story about how she thought she had a witch scratching on her window. Turns out it was just a tree that had grown too long. And what she says to him is, sometimes scary things go away when we understand them a little. And that is essentially what happens with Cody at the end of the movie,
Mm.
right? Like he has grown to understand what the canker man is and what it means, and so the scary thing will go away. And like, so the ending of this movie is her in this very long exposition sequence kind of explaining what happens. We get to see his mother, um played by once again our third performance of oh my gosh, what's her name? Matt, why don't I have this stuff pulled up ahead of time? I'm so bad at this. We'll just cut this part out. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Courtney Bell plays the mother. So Mike Flanagan's the mother of his first child plays the mother of this child in this movie, and gets to put on horrible cancer death makeup.
Yeah.
So we get to see this kind of thing play out, and then we're left with this thing where like Cody asks her to tell him a story, and she starts telling the story of the movie essentially, and it's like, is this a story with a happy ending? And she's like, oh, I think so. And he's like, well, what about all those people I killed? And it's like, yeah, what about those people actually? And Jesse's response to that is basically like, well, she tells him a story about how, well, they're all fine and happy, and it's like, is that even possible? It's like, I don't know, maybe. Like, and it's like, there's a part of that that's unsatisfying, but also like, I don't know, there's a part of me that's like, he deserves that, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's let him off the hook for some of this. Like, this poor kid has gone through so much and experienced so much, and let's give him this kind of moment of respite where he can at least like tell himself a story about how uh one day I'll maybe be powerful enough to actually bring these people back, or whatever.
Yeah. I think the it's a fun kind of ambiguity because it basically shows you two moments that are kind of diametrically opposed tonally
Yeah.
or so one of them is like the kid that he ate is just back. He just came
Hmm.
back from the void wherever he was. Doesn't matter. Magic.
Hmm.
And then the other one is Thomas Jane like waking up, but clearly he's dead because it's
Yeah.
his dead son there, and it's like, well, he's happy because he's with his son now, but that's only if Jacob Tremblay can't figure out how to rescue him. um, but on the other hand, if he if he can figure out how to rescue them, then that's good, and it leaves you with a sense of yes, like not being resolved, but I guess I didn't mind that specific um, element.
Is it too pat of an ending?
Well, Yeah, I was thinking about just the PG-13ness actually, which, full circle on the PG-13 question is like, can you end a PG-13 movie on a massive downer? Yes, you can. Is it going to be commercially viable to do that? Less so than a rated R movie, I think, but that's not a hard and fast rule, certainly. Um, so I mean, it's definitely more of a meant to make you feel good walking out of the theater ending
Hmm.
that kind of nicely ties up some things where you're like, I don't know about that. All those people are still dead. Um, I don't know. Maybe so.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I struggle with because I don't want to, because I do think like stylistically and the intention of having like a storybook ending is exactly that, is we are telling ourselves and we are telling Cody a story that he desperately deserves to have the ending of the story. Like he deserves to have that ending. Um,
Yeah.
but I wonder, I do kind of go back and forth on whether I think it's like, if it's like too, if it's too easy of an ending. It does feel like from the moment she like hands the butterfly to the canker man, we just kind it feels like we just kind of fly through the ending,
Yeah.
where like we get this long exposition sequence of the story of his mother, that's told to us, and then we get this, like, it just, like, whoa, we just
Yeah.
resolve all this stuff immediately right here, and it's okay, it's all fine now, we're good, let's end a movie. And I say that acknowledging the fact that I cried during this ending. Like, it was really emotionally, like, you watch the mother like wasting, I like, we talked about like losing a child being like the worst possible thing you can imagine. I think like the second worst possible thing you can imagine is this realization that you're going to leave your child without someone to love and take care of them. Like not just like, I'm dying, I'm losing my own life, but like by losing my life, I am leaving my child alone. Like, I think is like probably the second worst thing I could
Yeah.
imagine. Um, so we get, I got experiencing that. Like, I found it absolutely devastating. And then I like, so there were some happy tears of this concept of the two of them were going to lean on each other and grow together and be okay. I found very moving.
I think I guess the thing where I'm stuck is I hesitate to gripe about an ending if I have no better ideas, and I really do not. Like, so I'm actually sitting here comparing the ending of this against the ending of Absentia,
Mm,
which actually has a very similar structural ending where you have a scene of characters saying, "Well, what happened? What's going to happen?" And in Absentia, the characters willfully lie to themselves and tell themselves a story about how everything's fine, knowing that it's not. And that's a dark downer bummer ending, which I love. Um, and this is kind of a parallel to that, where the characters say, "Well, what's the meaning of all this? What's going to happen now?" And then the character says, I don't know. Like, it could all be great. It could all be magically fixed. Who knows? The point is, we have to tell ourselves something to move forward. I don't know the answer. Like, I think the truth is, in both cases, you're left with characters who don't actually know what's going to happen next, and they don't understand even the meaning of what's happened to them necessarily. But this is a happy ending because, hey, at least they survived. Although not all of them did, so
yeah.
it's not that happy of an ending. But they're gonna try to move forward despite it. I mean, that's okay. So like thematically, let's tackle it this way. Like, thematically, what you have is a woman who lost her son, was destroyed by it. Now she's lost her husband, but she has chosen to react to this differently. She's chosen to sort of, I don't know if I can draw this as cleanly as it deserves to be, but like, she's goal oriented now. She's like, I'm not going to be reactive to the loss of my husband. I'm going to go save this kid now, and me and this kid are going to be happy because my husband was right. There's a kid there who needs me, and that's all I need.
Yeah.
And she's and you can actually believe that she's going to be okay now, even having suffered a loss piled upon loss. And that's, I think, like an inspiring undercurrent to all of this is like even in the midst of even more loss than we started out with, there's still going to be healing.
Yeah, I like that. And it doesn't mean that her grief is gone. It doesn't mean that she's not going to miss her son every day. Like that is a part of you that I don't think ever truly goes away when you lose a kid. Um, but yeah, I mean, I like that because I do think like I think going back to my situation again, like I can imagine if the worst possible thing I could imagine happens to my child, like one of the things that would force me to go forward is that I have another child that still needs a parent to take care of her.
Yeah.
And like I think that is essentially what we find here. And maybe to your point, like why they got into fostering in the first place,
Mhm.
and eventually adopting is that idea of like just feeling like we need to have use and something to keep us tethered to the world, someone that needs us. Um, I like that.
Mhm. Cool.
I still don't know how I feel about like the actual exposition sequence itself. So we were talking
Sure.
about this earlier today, and one of the things I was trying to question in myself is like we talked about it in Oculus. There's this 13 or so minute exposition sequence where it's just a character essentially talking to camera, explaining the plot of the movie to us, and we really liked it there. And in this movie, we have essentially a 5 minute, maybe I didn't actually time this one, but around their sequence of a character telling another character a story, basically an exposition sequence explaining what the plot of this movie was. And I think it's interesting the way that like the Oculus one really worked on me, and I struggled with the one in Before I Wake a little bit. And I I, I was trying to like get to the bottom of why that is. Is it something about me? Like what is that? Like because I
Mhm.
don't think it's like a performance thing. Like I think both actors did a very good job with the material they had. So
Well, so for my part, the reason I think it was less successful for me is that I already figured all that stuff out.
okay.
Um, and so I was just like, I got it. Like, it didn't feel like the revelation maybe that it was supposed to,
hmm
because like I said, from the moment that it eats Thomas Jane, I was like, oh, it's the mom. And I wasn't even wrong in thinking like, no, it's actually him. It's like, well, it's him being the mom. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
symbolically the mom. And then when you get a good look at the monster, you're like, oh, his mom got sick and died of cancer, and that's why she has the voice that way, and that's why she looks that way.
Did you make the cancer leap on your own?
No, I didn't make that leap. That was one element that I was like, oh, okay, sure. So for me, I felt like it was sort of a moment that was paralleling the Sixth Sense ending moment where you hear the voiceover at the end, where it's like, we're going to show you all these things that happen and you're going to get it and it's going to blow your mind. And the thing is, I first saw the Sixth Sense when I was like 11 or something, and so it did blow my mind. Absolutely. I don't know how the Sixth Sense works on a person who sees it coming, And if you and I'm just speaking for myself, since I saw it coming, I'm like, okay, yep, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it is also true that like one of these exposition monologues is setting up the movie, and the other is the payoff of the movie.
Mhm,
It's the denouement. It's the climax. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Um, I just wonder, and this is not a fair. I'm gonna say this and immediately feel like I'm not being fair, but like I just wonder if there was a better, more active way to convey the information we learn in this sequence than just having two characters sit down and one telling it to the other. And I can't think of it. Like I can't think of the solution there. So maybe there's not. Maybe like this is just one of those things where you have this really great idea, this really solid idea, you're taking it through, and then it's like, okay, we have to end it now. How do we convey the information at the end?
mhm.
Um, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know
I
either.
think you're onto something though, because yeah, like now you have me thinking about the Sixth Sense a lot and how that just emotionally works on me so well, and part of the reason is because it's the shocking surprise, but it also like recontextualizes everything you understand about the characters and what they're going through, and like that same thing happens with this scene,
Mhm.
like it recontextualizes Cody and what he's been going through. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
you could imagine, like, I was actually thinking about this because it's like it's very tricky to make a movie that relies on your audience like picking up on things, you know? Like
Mhm.
so okay, what I mean is um let's say let's say that instead of the canker man turning into the boy, the canker man turns into the woman who we recognize as being his mom from some previous scene. And then and then let's say that the movie then proceeds with no further dialogue and just ends with them walking out of the building. What percentage of people are going to get all of the necessary implications from what I just described?
Sure.
Like
Low,
90,
low percentage.
10? Like I
Yeah.
cuz I the Sixth Sense ending does kind of spoon feed you.
Sure.
Like and so it's not that we're saying you can't spoon feed, but I don't know. That's the thing. I just don't know the answer to this, so it's very hard for me to say like it should have been this way because I'm like I
Yeah.
don't really think I understand exactly how to do something like this well. You know?
Yeah, I don't either. It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
This whole like, hey, turns out writing very difficult. Figuring out how to pay things off very difficult. I like what you said there, and I think that the problem that I guess I had is I like part of the parts I love most about this movie are the parts that it's revealing stuff subtextually, or not even subtextually, but it's not spelling it out. Like one of my favorite sequences in the movie is everything that happens when Jesse is walking through the kind of chrysalis mental institution,
Hmm.
and one of the things she sees is a version of herself, like an eyeless version of herself, walk into a room, walk up to Cody sitting on the couch. She grabs his head and like squishes his face together, and then when she pulls her hands away, Cody has transformed into Sean.
Hmm.
Um, and then that's when Thomas Jane shows up and a bug crawls out of his eye, which is awesome.
Hmm.
Um, and that scene like says so much, right? Like that's a scene that basically makes it textual that Cody knew on some level, whether consciously or subconsciously, knew that what Jesse really wanted from him was Sean,
Hmm.
and so much wanted him to just be Sean. And he's internalized that in the scene of her walking up to him and squishing his face until she like molds his face into Sean's face. It's a great moment. Wonderful stuff. Great character work. Loved every bit of it. It allows Jesse to also see the truth of what she was doing physically in front of her. But there's never like a line when Jesse says, or when Cody says, "I know you were using me um, for your grief."
Hmm.
And that's what I feel like some of the exposition is. Now I
Hmm.
say that, and there is definitely a line where she says to Cody, I was using you for Sean,
Hmm.
and I will never do that again. So they do, I guess, make it
Yeah.
come right out and say it, but maybe they didn't need to. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I think this is maybe going to be a thing that we return to in future conversations because we talked earlier about the idea that Flanagan has what are described as talkie scripts, but we like that. And then in some
Yeah,
cases, I think maybe it's like, okay, I mean, kind of like I said a minute ago, it's like, well, I already got it. I already got it. So talk like telling me this, I'm just like, okay, I'm mentally disengaging. And I don't like hate it. I'm like, I got it. So
sure.
I don't need this. Um, and so I think that's one way in which it might be hit or miss over time. And I don't see it as like a huge flaw. It is interesting. I'm kind of just like imagining what the movie would be like if it just like ended with no dialogue. It was just like all imagery, you know, like. And I'm not saying that would have been better. It's
Yeah.
interesting to think about these things.
Man, I'm really
Um,
torn here. I'm really torn about this because like there's part of me that wants to just walk back everything I've said so far. Because I'm like, no, I'm wrong. But there's part of me that's like, well, I mean, I definitely like while watching it got the feeling of but simultaneously of this is how we're ending the movie, but then also like, oh, this is really sad and I'm crying now.
uh-huh.
Like how do I have both those feelings at the same time. I don't know. And you got me thinking, like, as you were talking about, like, Flanagan and his talkie scripts and his monologues that we're going to see a lot more later, like thinking of sequences in future shows and movies that we're going to cover that end on kind of this very powerfully emotional but exposital
Mhm.
monologue scene. And like I I love those moments. And they're some of my favorite moments of those shows. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what to think. I still haven't gotten to the bottom exactly of why exactly this doesn't work on me. Because I see what you mean about, like, it's because you saw it coming. I both did and didn't see it coming. I think I did, but I didn't, like, immediately go, "Oh, yeah, okay, I got it, move on." Like, that wasn't my emotional reaction to it. It was just I don't know what my emotional reaction to it was, honestly.
Yeah. Again, I have to return to the idea that, like, because the movie sort of pivots on its narrative footing twice, um, there's a good chance that you're prepared for this to happen, and then we, like, start doing that, and you're like, "Oh, that's not the story I thought we were in." Um, and because I do get what you're talking about. Like, the movie up in, the first hour of the movie, there's like a break, and then the last half hour of the movie happens,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
a very sharp break. And like, another thing I didn't say yet is, like, the movie also becomes an entirely different flavor of scary. And what I mean by that is, like, the first hour of the movie, I felt this pervasive dread, um, and was very creeped out by a few specific moments. And then once the monster is, like, fully revealed in not not full, bright light, but, like, you can see the monster,
yeah.
a lot of the fear goes away entirely, because you're like, oh, it's like almost a claymation. It's a child's impression of a monster. Once you see it fully lit, you realize, like, oh, um it's not actually that scary. It
Mhm.
like the metaphor being like, what, once it's illuminated, you realize, like, oh, this is not something I should be scared of. This is something the kid is scared of.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then even when she goes into um the institution at the end to find him, there were some spooks in that sequence too. But I was, like, confident, like, okay, she's going to get him. She's going to save him. She's going
yeah,
to have to. And it's more like the horror of, like, confronting these apparitions. Not that they're going to kill her, but it's just like, it's almost like cool. It's like cool more than it is scary,
yeah.
and that all felt intentional to me.
I agree. I mean, I like that moment where she walks into that room in the hospital or whatever and sees the bathtub,
Hmm. Yeah.
and eventually sees Cody in the bathtub and then has to see him, um like, splash around and struggle, like, is a culmination of a scene that we saw very early in the movie, which, but wonderfully shot scene, that
Hmm.
moment where she, like, wakes up in the middle of the night and, like, walks to the bathtub and just, like, sits there and experiences what I guess is just her guess on what his death was like, because
Yeah.
again, she wasn't there. If she was there, she would have saved him. So she doesn't actually know how exactly he drowned, but she's imagining this great struggle and this inability to pull himself out of the tub. We never actually get, like, definitive statement on, like, what happened, right?
Hmm.
Because I don't know how old Sean was supposed to be in this movie, but like, he wasn't like a
Yeah.
baby. So
I mean, I think when we talked about this earlier, you suggested, like, well, like, a kid of any age, even an adult, can slip and hit their head, and
yeah, yeah.
in which case there probably wouldn't have been thrashing. But
Right.
if you're in that situation, yeah, you're going to imagine the worst possible thing and torture yourself with it.
Yeah, but Flanagan films that whole sequence of her, like, looking at the bathtub, and it's this powerfully emotional sequence, and, like, you got these shots of the bathroom through the door, and it almost looks like it's a shot that is, like, setting up a hand to reach over the tub or
Hmm.
something monstrous or scary like that, and that never happens because the point of the sequence is just the horror of this place and this incredibly mundane tragedy that happened here. And then that is juxtaposed at the end of the movie by kind of the payoff of what you thought you were going to see there, which is Ghost Sean, like, there,
Mhm.
and that's what happens. And I don't know, I guess I found like the first version of that type of scare more satisfying than like the actual manifestation of ghost Sean there.
Yeah.
um
Well, you
but
mentioned
that is, I mean, but that is a necessary point in the movie because she sees that and then she turns her back on it and walks out of the room, right?
yeah,
Like that's symbolic of her leaving and walking away from her son,
yeah,
drowning in a bathtub,
yeah,
knowing this is not really my son. This is not like none of this is real.
yeah, and doing what she can do to help this
Yeah.
new boy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So
there's a lot
I
of
don't know.
scary stuff in this movie.
I really like this movie. That's like we talked for like 20 minutes about the end and little tiny parts of it that didn't work for me, but like and I
Well,
don't think I've even articulated like why they didn't work for me, but I there's so much to love in this movie, I think.
yeah, I think it just tends to drive us crazy when we can't quite put our finger on it because
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're always trying to do. Um,
Yeah.
the scary moments. I want to talk specifically about like two great visual scary moments, and I think I want to make sure to do this like with every Flanagan thing because to me, like the moment when I super fell in love with Midnight Mass, which well, I'm not going to say what the moment is, but it was like a visual thing where I was
Mhm.
like, oh, that I've never seen that before. That's fun. Um, and then of course I fell in love with like the writing and the characters and everything. But it was a visual thing that kind of first made me like sit up and be like, oh, this is different. This is a different sensibility. And I think Midnight Mass was my first thing that I'd watched that was Flanagan. So
Mhm.
that was the hook for me. So all that to say, the two moments. you, I don't know if you know what I'm going to say,
I
but what
don't.
so one of them is simply like the parents are in the living room talking, and I think maybe like something draws their attention on like the left part of the screen, and they're like walking in that direction, and the camera pans, and we just see standing in the dark doorway is the hunched silhouette of the canker man dimly lit, like there's no acknowledgement of this by anyone.
Yeah.
And that's when that's when I texted you, oh god damn it. Because I was like, oh, this we're gonna I was honestly thinking we were gonna get a bunch more of that kind of thing. And honestly, there was some of the more of the like lurking dread imagery, but it was kind of localized to that part of the movie actually.
Mhm.
Um and then I think actually relatively close to that scene, the other moment I wanted to mention was like it's one of the times I think she goes to get water and she sees a kid in the house and it's like a dark silhouette and and then it like so my visual impression is like they must have had the kid standing on like a dolly and like very slowly just pulled the dolly forward because there's not an impression of a human's taking a step.
Mhm.
There's not like the mechanics of a step. It's just like floating forward slowly and the light shifting across the face as the creature, you know, the kid comes into the light, and that's it. But that's gave me the willies, an extraordinary amount.
Unnatural movement. It creeps you out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I enjoyed both of those. Good call. I the thing I like about the scene where we first see the Caker Man, I agree with you. Just him standing there in the background menacingly is perfect. There's another part of that scene where she's bit by the moth,
uh-huh,
and then the moth like flies up on the ceiling, and she's like looking around. And Flanagan several times in this movie uses really shallow depth of field.
uh-huh,
So the camera goes out of focus on the background like immediately, and we see that moth like land on the ceiling,
uh,
and then out of focus we just see it like that dark spot like slowly grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like it's out of focus, we can barely see it but we can see it, and
uh-huh.
it's so creepy. I loved it.
Yeah, and it's behind Thomas Jane's head, I think, and he doesn't. Neither of them see it. You just see
Yeah,
this
yeah,
darkness spreading. Yeah,
yeah,
I remember
it's
what
so
you're
great.
talking about. Yeah,
I loved that so
me
much.
too.
But yeah, the scene with the kid running around was very creepy. It's, I mean, even the scene with like Sean, the first time we see Sean, and it's just the picture of him
Hmm.
just like recreated because all he's done is dreaming about the one picture of Sean he's seen, and
Uh-huh.
he's just standing there with a big smile on his face, and it's like this is a little
Yeah.
It's a little
Well,
creepy,
I
actually.
I have to give props to the little Sean actor because it was a fantastic, empty, dead-eyed smile.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, yeah, I guess this is an audio podcast, but it's very, uh, uh, upsetting, like, just blankness
Mhm.
and, uncanniness to it. I love that.
Yeah. One other sequence that really creeped me out is the "I'm awake, this can't be happening" scene.
Mhm,
So, Flanagan d I love this shot. So, once again, this is the 3rd movie I pointed this out, but once again, he does this thing where we start with a character lying down, and then as they stand up, the camera moves 45 degrees with them.
mhm,
This is like the third movie we've done this. And so Kate Bosworth is lying down on the ground. She opens her eyes. The camera's in front of her looking at her. So we can't see what she sees,
uh-huh,
right? We just see like this look of happiness on her face cuz so we're like, "Oh, she's opened her eyes and she's seeing Sean." Um so we see this look of happiness, and then the look of happiness slowly changes to confusion and then horror as she sits up and the camera follows her. And Flanagan holds on the shot for so long, and we so desperately want to see what she's seeing to have this reaction.
uh-huh,
And he just won't let us. He won't let us and won't let us. And finally, he cuts to it, and it's Sean with like huge, terrified eyes, just saying, uh, just saying like I'm awake, this can't be happening, I'm awake, this can't be happening, and he's just
yeah,
kind of whispering it. He's like, I'm awake, this can't be happening, I'm awake, this can't be happening. And it's so creepy. I love
yeah,
that scene. And by the way, I love that moment again as a setup and payoff, right? Because the uh, psychologist in the group in early in the movie says when she's saying that she had a dream and it felt really real, or it wasn't a dream, it felt really real. And he's like, yeah, well, sometimes you can have levels of REM sleep while you're awake. It's called like a waking dream.
uh-huh,
So that was a setup there of that's what's happening is he's so exhausted that he's dreaming while he's awake.
yeah, and I think that's also gestures at the fact that he's eventually gonna be able to use these abilities outside of his dreams.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah,
what the end of the movie implies, right?
yeah,
That like he's sitting there, he closes his eyes and he creates the butterfly, and when he opens his eyes, the butterfly doesn't go away, it changes color. So yeah, this is something that manifests in his dreams because he doesn't quite know how to work it yet, but
mm,
yeah, he's gonna be a very powerful little boy.
yeah, yep.
We're gonna have the Before I Wake cinematic universe.
Yeah, he's got the power,
This does actually take place within the same universe as Oculus, technically, I
uh-huh.
guess, if we want to get technical about it,
Oh,
because
yeah?
the mental hospital that she goes to visit the foster dad whose wife got eaten, is the same mental institution that Tim from Oculus was released from, and is presumably back at. I mean, maybe
Mhm.
he was there. I don't know, but it's the same place, same name. So I believe this film was filmed in the same location as well. It was filmed in Alabama, like the other one. So
Awesome.
yeah, I don't
Well,
know why Alabama. Probably like incentives, tax
s
incentives.
so the kid's gotta confront the mirror someday.
Yeah,
Maybe you, like, pull the mirror into the tunnel,
yeah.
and
I mean,
then
we've been
the
talking about the Sixth Sense a lot. I mean, I think we're gonna have an unbreakable split glass
uh-huh,
type of
crossover
surprise
crossover,
crossover
yeah.
movie someday.
They run into, uh, Abra at some point.
Matt, we haven't watched that
We
movie
haven't
yet.
watched that movie yet, yeah, I have to pretend I don't know about that, yeah.
I actually kind of hope. First of all, I hope this never happens because it's fucking ridiculous. But like, if it were to happen, I hope it would be with the OG Flanagan properties and not
Uh-huh.
any of the adaptations.
I mean, the thing based on my understanding of the sensibility of these first movies is like if you did try to, pull the Oculus mirror into the Absentia tunnel to trap the monster, then this would just backfire on you in a way that would be just unimaginably hellish.
Hmm.
Um and it would not work. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think you are right there. um, I mean, I don't know. Like, so do we think? We had Absentia, that had a sad ending. We had Oculus that had a rough ending. Now we have our third Latin film. This, as I said last week, this was originally called Somnia. I think it was actually released as Somnia in some international territories as well. This is one thing where I wonder, like, to me, that's just clearly studio meddling,
Yeah.
right? Like, Like no one's gonna see a movie named Somnia, so we got to give it a really catchy title, like
Yeah, and
Before I Wake.
before I wake is fine.
I don't like it. I mean, part of that is knowing that Somnia existed, and
Yeah,
I think that's just better. But
right. We could have had the Latin trilogy, and
yeah.
instead we have yeah.
So in the Latin trilogy, this is the only one with a semi happy ending. Is this just Flanagan growing older and softening? Part of me thinks like this is definitely a movie written by a father who is processing like all the terrible things you think about as a parent, right?
Mhm,
Like like we talked about already, parenthood is one of the most wonderful things in the world. I have so much fun with my children. I love being a parent. I love watching them grow. I love all of it. But it's also perpetual terror at any of the 7 million things in any given day that could kill them.
uh-huh,
And like, I totally understand why someone going through that process would come up with a concept of a story like this because yeah, like I can't I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast, but I did have like something like this happen to a family friend of ours that lived in our neighborhood when I was a kid, who their 3 or 4 year old was playing on like a rope swing in their backyard and accidentally hung himself. And I'm talking about this because I remember this very visceral. I was like 10 years old, but I just have a visceral memory of getting home from school on the school bus, seeing ambulances and fire trucks and everything around the house, figuring out what's going on and just being horrified and like never forgetting like any of this experience at all. It's like burned into my brain. And
yeah,
it wasn't even happening to me. So like it's just like this incredibly like it was all I could think about when I had a kid actually, for a while there. That was all I could think about. And it's just it's just awful, man. It's just awful. And I totally understand why a new parent would be like, yeah, this is terrifying. I need to work out this terror I feel of this by writing about it.
sure. I mean, I agree with you that like ropes are terrifying once you become a parent.
Yeah.
I don't have a story like the one you just told, but I had heard of stories like that, and I was just like, oh, that's the scariest shit I've ever heard of. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's not going to be any ropes anywhere near my children ever. Um, and bathtubs are also terrifying.
Yeah.
Just like you're just like, yeah, it's especially when the kid is like it's almost like okay, when they're really little, it's like, well, I'm just gonna be sitting there the whole time, so
Yeah.
nothing's gonna happen. I'm gonna at most like go get a towel from like over there, and then I'll be right
Yeah.
back. Like, but then there's like the gray area between like, okay, I think they're old enough that I can leave them in the tub. I can't watch them bathe for their whole lives. So there's got to be a day where you decide like, okay, I'm gonna go downstairs.
Yeah.
You good? Oh, it's and it's getting that is a period of getting used to.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and again, I don't know how old Sean was supposed to be. I think I read online that he was supposed to be 8. He feels too small for 8 for me. I think Cody is 8 for
mhm,
sure in the movie, Jacob Tremblay's character, but it felt like Sean was closer to like 5 or 6. And it's like, is that the point? You know, like and as we said, even if you're old enough to just be in the bath yourself, like freak things can happen,
yeah,
and you just never freaking know, man. You just
yeah,
never know.
totally. And both, the bathtub is the most mundane thing ever. You have to take a bath basically every day if you're a
Yeah.
kid,
Mhm.
um, exposing yourself to risk of death.
And
Uh,
my children love the bath. Like they're still young enough, they bathe together and they love playing in the bath together with toys. And it's this joyous place. But all this week, all I could think about was this fucking bathtub. I'm
uh-huh,
never leaving this room ever. Sorry.
yeah,
That is, by the way, the one moment that I was not like on team Thomas Jane in this movie was when she's outside the bathroom while Cody is taking a bath
uh-huh,
and like just checking on him, making sure he's okay. And Thomas Jane walks up and is like, "He's fine. He's fine." And I'm like, cut her some slack, man.
yeah,
That's the bathtub.
uh-huh,
Like, I think it's okay if she just waits outside the door just in case she hears something.
yeah. I think I'm on the same page as you there. I mean, but I also understand his character his character is consistently
It's
trying
very
to
in
be
character.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're gonna move on. We're gonna get everything back to the way it was,
Clean
and
slate.
it's like not really possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awful. Awful.
yeah,
Great movie though.
yeah.
Anything else you wanted to say about the Canker Man?
That would have been a good title.
No, it wouldn't have.
No, I think I said all of my bits. How about you?
No, I mean, I think we got everything that I wanted to talk about. I also want to say they were watching House on Haunted Hill on the TV one night, which is not to be confused with The Haunting of Hill House, which is different. Um,
Okay.
but I thought it was fitting. They had some of the seeing of the ghosts for the first time was overlaid with uh, House on Haunted Hill talking about ghosts. Thought that was a
Mm,
clever little Flanagan trick there.
cool. I didn't notice that. I
Hmm.
didn't recognize that movie.
Yeah, no, I think that was everything.
All
Really
right.
enjoyed this one. I just want to like IMDb does not matter, not IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes does
Uh-huh.
not matter at all. Let's be clear about this.
Sure,
Rotten
sure.
Tomatoes is irrelevant essentially.
Yeah.
But this is Flanagan's worst performing Rotten Tomatoes film, and it's rocking like a 66%.
Uh-huh.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. I still enjoyed the movie. Suck it,
I
Rotten
really did.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, take that. This one guy.
Yeah.
So that is it for Before I Wake. Next week we'll be taking a look at the final film in our like kind of first five before we head to the world of adaptation, which I think we're going to spend the rest of 2025 in adaptations, Matt. So we're going to
Okay.
be here quite a while, but um, we're going to be talking about Ouija, Origin of Evil, the prequel sequel to a movie about a evil Ouija board.
Awesome. I'm very excited about this.
It's another PG-13 movie, Matt. I just want you to level set that with you.
Okay.
If you have some sort of long-standing problem with PG-13 horror that you need to get off your chest,
Now's the time.
yeah,
Yeah. No, no. I mean the reason I made a big deal out of it here is like, well, you can just tell there's like a discontinuity in tone between this movie and the ones we just talked about. So
yeah.
that's all.
No, I agree with that. I mean, and like we said, this was the biggest film he had made up until this point, and with more money comes more expectations and more control and more people wanting to tell you how to do your job.
Yep.
And I think we will see something similar with this next film. Although I enjoy it quite a bit, so I'm looking forward to chatting with you about it.
All right.
All right, Matt. Let's move on to our discussion questions for the week. What was our question a fortnight ago that we asked people?
Last week, we observed that mirrors are creepy, and we asked people to provide their favorite mirror in storytelling. First answer comes from Apocalypse Win 7. They say, in honor of David Lynch, and without delving into spoilers, the second season of Twin Peaks ends in a mirror shot that haunted me for years with the implications of it, especially back when I thought that was the last chronological shot of Twin Peaks that we would ever see. It was frustrating in its lack of resolution until season 3 came out and added all new levels of frustrating lack of resolution in the best way. That's great. I still haven't watched Twin Peaks, so that's
Yeah, when are we
just.
gonna fix that? So you've never watched Twin Peaks. I've never watched Twin Peaks: The Return.
Oh,
So I did not watch when Lynch went back to it. I need to fix that pronto. Um, gosh,
I,
we're
I
gonna have to
told
like cover Twin Peaks at some point.
I told you, Scott. You just create a new podcast and put it on my calendar,
Oh, okay.
and I'll just
Let
be
me
like,
just
"Oh, we're watching Twin Peaks." Okay.
yeah, let me just look at my schedule, see where I have time for another pot. Nowhere,
Yeah.
nowhere.
Oh.
2027, I think will be good.
Okay. Good to know.
Next, we have Baby Can You Dig Your Sam, who says, I'm going to go with the funhouse mirrors at the beginning of Jordan Peele's Us. It's a creepy scene anyway. If I think one mirror is scary, you can imagine my unease at a room full of them. And thematically, an amazing choice. Mirrors and reflections are cleverly interwoven into multiple scenes, but it's the initial funhouse sequence that sets it all up and nails it. Good answer. I really like that movie.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like I felt like people didn't enjoy that one as much. I mean, it's hard when you come from Get Out, which was just an incredible like introductory movie to Jordan Peele, and like the sophomore attempt is always judged more harshly. But I really liked Us.
I mean, it definitely scared the crap out of me. That scene in particular. I always just remember you see the little girl's face and her reacting to something she sees, but you don't find out what it is that she saw for
Hmm.
a lot more movie, and that
Hmm.
being really scary.
Yeah, and
Cool.
man, I really liked Nope too.
Me too. It's
Man,
good
what a
stuff.
guy.
What a guy.
You know what I can't wait for?
What?
Untitled fourth film directed by Jordan Peele
Oh
comes
shit!
out in
Really?
2026.
Excited about Untitled fourth film. All right. Jaraxis Eridar Lord says, I'll give it to Smeagol having a face to face with Gollum in The Two Towers. I love good madness scenes, and Peter Jackson hit the right notes.
Yeah, the scene where basically Smeagol and Gollum confront each other, and Smeagol defeats Gollum. That is a really great scene. I loved. I think it starts out with him looking at his reflection and in a pool of water, and then Jackson is just signaling between the two with a camera cut
Uh-huh.
of them on like different sides of them. It works
Yeah,
really well.
yeah. It's funny. I wouldn't have thought of that as a mirror scene, but I think it totally qualifies.
Yeah. All right. Pear Jane says, Doof Cannon covered Poltergeist last year, and while neither of you were huge fans of it, I'm sure. Wait, was that true? I thought we liked
Yeah.
it. Okay.
No, I didn't.
Oh yeah, you didn't like it. I think you talked me into liking it less.
Yeah.
You jerk. What'd you do that for?
Yes.
I'm sure it's a top Gen Xer go-to for freaky mirror sequences. Candyman wins the prize, of course. The sight of the paranormal investigator systematically peeling the skin off his face has not aged well from a practical special effects standpoint, but it's still really, really gross. Special shout out to the cuts to the sink where we see an increasingly large chunks of flesh landing in the running water. The scene leads to an excellent punchline the following day. Marty will not be coming back.
Uh, yeah. No,
I
I
need to
thought
go
that.
back. I
Yeah.
really need to go back and listen to our episode again because I feel like I like that movie, and now I feel like you've tainted me.
I think we had a really interesting conversation. Um, I mean, I remember my impression being like, this isn't scary at all. This is ridiculous. And then I think maybe our conclusion was like, well, maybe that's what it's going for.
Yeah,
Anyway, I don't remember.
I think we got a lot of good comments from people talking about like a thing we didn't spend a lot of time on, which is like the existential terror of being a mother of a child that has disappeared and
Yeah.
desperately trying to find her. So I don't know. I thought it was a fine movie,
I don't know, man. I don't know.
except for the parts where the mom just like lets these full-grown men hit on her 16-year-old
I
daughter.
I mean, again, I think it was doing a lot of intentional stuff with the
Yeah. Yeah.
implications of that. Let's relitigate it right now, Scott. No, gigantic Mike says, "I've always loved the mirrors as a clever weapon trope from the myth of Perseus. Clash of the Titans was a super influential film for me as a kid, and the use of a shield to overcome the raw power of a monster was something I latched onto. Mirrors as portals were still terrifying, but they are also incredibly useful if you knew how to wield them. My favorite example was the scene from Ridley Scott's Legend, where Jack is caught in the clutches of the witch Meg, and he enchants her with flattery and her own reflection just long enough to get his sword."
Ah, yes, Ridley Scott's Legend movie. That's one that I did not like.
Um, yeah, I think that was one of those movies I saw when I was so young that I barely remember it, honestly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I know that scene though, and I thought it was really cool.
Oh, sorry. No, I know what you're talking about. We did a doofcast on
Yeah,
that.
we did all of Ridley Scott, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good movie. I love that movie.
This is Matt at the end of 2 hours of podcasting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for those answers, and thanks everyone who sent those. We got a ton of answers on this one, and it's really cool. If you're ever curious, like we only read a subsection of all answers we get. If you want to participate in the discussion and see what other people said, make sure you check out the Reddit because that is where most of those answers come in. Is on our subreddit. That's r/Doof Media.
That's right.
All right, Matt, what are we doing for next fortnight? What is our question going to be?
Well, broadly speaking, what's your favorite use of dreams in storytelling?
Mhm.
Can be nightmares, can be gimmicks where the dreams are magical in some way, or it can just be a dream sequence. We're open minded.
Yeah, Matt, have you seen Nightmare on Elm Street yet?
Is that the one with Freddy Krueger?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say once again, yeah, I think I saw that movie a long time ago, but I don't remember it very well. I don't think we did a podcast about it that I'm
We have
forgetting.
not. I think you're
Okay.
just lying. I think that's what it is.
It's possible.
Yeah. I think there's lots of examples. Like it could be like horror related. It could be not. It's up to you. Like a lot of movies use dream sequences and stories and things like that. So I think in honor of Somnia, let's talk about some dreams.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for us this week. As we said, next week we continue our journey through Mike Flanagan's filmography with his third and final 2016 film, Ouija: Origin of Evil. I'm pretty pumped about this one.
Me too. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com, over on X at flanaganswake19. The best place to answer the discussion question is generally going to be the Reddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. We're on Instagram and so on at Doof Media. And of course, we have a Blue Sky account, Flanagan's Wake Pod on Blue Sky. Don't forget that every episode can be found in video format on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube right now, please leave us a comment letting us know what you think about the show. And glad to see you over here.
Yeah, we fought the law last week and we won.
Yeah.
We got copyright flagged for those little clips we throw on the YouTube, and we said, "Hey, that's fair use."
Yeah.
We're just wanting to educate people on this great movie.
Yeah.
Please.
And YouTube said, "Oh, our bad."
Actually, it was the copyright holder who said that.
Oh, okay. They said, "Oh, our bad." Yeah.
Yeah, they said, "No, you're right." I think I think the second a human being looked at it instead of the automated system, they went, "Oh yeah, no, you're obviously correct here."
Yeah.
So we will continue to put them on YouTube. We will continue to use clips where we can, and I think it's a lot of fun. And the people that are watching the podcast on YouTube are enjoying it. So we encourage you guys to check that out as well. We also encourage you to head on over to our merch store at doofmedia.myshopify.com, where you can find merch for Flanagan's Wake and for all of the other shows we do. We think it's just really fun. I have my "If you podcast me, then podcast me" mug right here, which is a wonderful inside joke that
Yeah.
no one who hasn't listened to Kingslingers will get, and that's fine.
Yeah. That's the best kind of merch, I think.
I do want to say, I need like, so I have my Flanagan's Wake hoodie, right? I got a hoodie that has our logo on it, which I love our logo, and I wear it. And no one has one time asked me what that is. Because I mean, that's why you wear merch for shows, right? Is so
Right.
people can ask you about it, and then you can tell them all your nerdy interests.
Yeah.
Nobody has asked me one time. My wife put on my Flanagan's Wake hoodie just to like go run an errand, and like 3 people were like, "What's that?" So maybe it's just women, Where where are our merch so people will ask you about it.
Yeah. Just women, please. That's funny. That's funny. I get a weird number of comments on my Snowdrop sweater that is not on the merch store. But anyway, if you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Every level of donation gives you the ability to vote for the books that we cover on the book club. And we should have a new episode of our bonus podcast to a From podcast up there.
I think by the time they're listening to this, it should be up there.
Should be up now. Yeah.
But I lose track of these weeks. They all run together,
hard,
so
yeah.
I'm not sure. But I think that's right. Of course, if you cannot afford to be a member on Patreon, that is absolutely okay. there, we're still new, right? This is the fourth episode of our podcast now. So we're still new and we're still growing and we still need your help. So it would be hugely helpful if you could share the podcast, if you could talk about us online, and if you could leave us rating and reviews on whatever podcast platform you use. You guys have been doing really great at that so far. I really do appreciate it. We have, I mean, right now on um, Apple alone, at United States Apple alone, we've got 34 ratings, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. Please keep those coming. This week's spotlight review comes from Lottie999, who says, "Great work! So excited to start this series. I've been binging Kingslingers over the last month as I make my first journey to the tower, book 7 now, and this promises to keep the same level of insight and analysis that I've grown to love. I'm especially excited to dive into the source material for Flanagan's adaptations later. Long days, pleasant nights, and rest in peace, Matt and Scott." The tables have turned, and I don't like it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that review, and I am very excited. For those that maybe are new to this podcast and don't necessarily know, once we complete Ouija Origin of Evil next week, we are going to dive into Gerald's game, and that will conclude with our discussion on Mike Flanagan's film. But first, we're going to read the book, and we're going to talk about the book over the course of like a month and a half. So we do these really close kind of dives into the source material and talk about it in a lot of detail. And I really enjoy that format as well. That's what we did on our old Stephen King podcast, and we're going to be bringing that here to this podcast with Stephen King. So I'm pretty excited about that as well. So you have that to look forward to, along with our eventual review and discussion on the film itself.
It's going to be fun getting back into books. I mean, we enjoyed movies too, clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that is it. Until then, sweet dreams, everyone.
Yeah.
Don't let the canker man bite. We'll
The
see you next week.
little black moth.
Yeah, freaking moth. Do moths bite?
No.
I guess when they're imagined by a child, they do.
Yeah. Demon moths.
How do you just know if moths bite or not? Are you like a moth expert?